Hello there, this is just a quick walkthrough of the active ragdoll system I've got so far, specifically the ability to switch to a falling state, which I'll demonstrate right now. So you can see that there's a debug trace here, which is there to detect the surface that the character is currently standing on, and if you were to jump off something, it would do a height detection, and that basically is saying, oh look, this is okay, it wasn't there, but this is like high enough to be safe to land on without, breaking your ankles. Whereas um, if we were to jump off a higher place like this, then it's like, oh, there's nothing safe for me to land on. I'm now going to switch to this falling state instead, and then it gets knocked out as soon as it hits the floor. So the way that works is in the physical animation component that I've got attached to the player character. Um, on event tick, it's grabbing the mesh's current velocity and storing that for later. I'll get around to that. And then it enters a gate which runs the line trace or sphere trace for the surface below, um, which just runs a trace from the mesh's pelvis down to the floor. And if it's too high, if there is a blocking hit, that means that it's high enough for them to land on. If there isn't a blocking hit, that means that there's nothing there, and it's now going to enter the full state as a result. Um, and once it's done that, it chooses whether to have ragdolling set on, which is going to affect the animation blueprint later. Um, so if ragdolling is on, then that means that this is a bit confusing here, but I'm going to clean this up later. It will call the falling state custom event, which basically causes the pelvis to simulate physics as well, so that it detaches from the capsule component in the player character, which causes it to fall off by itself. And then it switches to a different physical animation profile, which is basically much weaker than the standing one, so that gets more of that sort of flaily motion. And then it turns off the check for the height, and saves that for when they've landed on the ground and they're upright again. And then it switches this to none, so that one of the problems I had before was that when the ragdoll was set to fully simulate when it was falling, is that the capsule would still be moving based on player input, and that would cause problems later on. Like the player character would have fallen off the level, but the mesh was still on it. So that just stops the player character from moving anymore. Um, and then after that, it runs a function which checks if it's landed on a surface or not. And the way it does that, it grabs the velocity of the ragdoll mesh and checks if its z velocity, so its up and down motion, is below 200. And it gets the absolute, so that if it's that's to make sure that it's not moving whatsoever up or down. So absolute just converts it from negative to positive at all times. So if there's any velocity value here that's less than 200, then that means that it's landed on the floor. So as a result, it will run the landed state, which keeps this as true, and then switches to the knockout profile, which is basically just like full ragdoll. There's no like flailing, there's no movement or anything. And what I would like to do next, of course, is add a means of letting the player come out of ragdoll afterwards. So once they've hit the floor, I'm going to start like a stun timer, which may be larger or smaller depending on the height of the fall. But once that's out, the player will pop back up and they'll be able to continue playing afterwards with, some slight damage to their pride or whatever. In terms of the animation blueprint as well, there is affected a bit. It will detect whether the player is ragdolling, and that will affect the state that it's in later. So there is a falling state here. Not this one, this is like the safe falling, this is just transitioning out from the jump animation. But this is like the full falling, which is that flailing animation you get earlier. And that will only transition if The mesh velocity, which is the ragdoll itself, not the player character, if the Z velocity is less than 0, I may have to change that to just anything other than 0, which is basically it telling it, right, the mesh is now fully physics simulated, it's now falling, that means you now have to play this animation. And yeah, I think that's about it for for this commentary video. So yeah, like I've said, I want to get the player fully ragdoll, coming back out of ragdolling again, so they can carry on moving and playing and whatever. And I'm just gonna have to keep experimenting to figure out a way of doing that. So yeah, thanks for watching.